In this video, we will talk about a question that may be as old as humanity. Can the existence of God be proven 1000%? That is, the limited human mind is God. If not, how can he be sure of the existence of a God? Wouldn't this be more of an assumption or a wish? Look, the answer to this question is so critical that if we say no, it cannot be proven, the beliefs of all believers until now and from now on are actually we will say that it is just a simple assumption. Therefore, it may be as old as humanity. Let's examine this question carefully and touch on a few things. Proof is called revealing the true aspect of a thing by bringing one or more pieces of evidence that will create definite information or a Gallup conjecture about the reality of any claim. Therefore, evidence. The more understandable, clear, and powerful it is, the closer it is to the truth in proof. Secondly, it should be known that while trying to reach a truth, all people, whether they are aware of it or not, take into account all possible possibilities and accept the one with the most evidence as the truth. For example, when faced with an unsolved murder whose murderer is unknown. A certain profile is created by taking the evidence into consideration. The suspects who fit this profile are caught, and a distinguishing feature among these suspects is that when there is another piece of evidence pointing to only one person, it is believed that he is the murderer, and the stronger the evidence, the stronger the belief that that person is the murderer becomes. It moves away and gets closer to the truth. Meanwhile, you may believe that any of the other suspects is the murderer, but this remains nothing more than a justified, unreasonable belief. Thirdly, the claim that the evidence of a metaphysical being must also be metaphysical. First of all, this is also a claim, and the burden of proof, that is, the obligation to prove, is the duty of the claimant. That is, only this claim. To prove that if an entity has an effect on matter, the evidence of that entity can of course be searched within the matter. In the same way, it is also a claim that it should be scientific proof. Yes, the scientific civilization may have brought technology to this level, but this does not mean that science is the only way to reach the truth. Moreover, in the simplest terms, due to the methodology of science, metaphysics is subject to matter. Therefore, you cannot even do the task of reading a book, which is a very simple task with the scientific method, because the unobservable meaning you will reach by reading the book is not scientific. What we are basically trying to say here is that the proof methods of proving the reality of any claim are restricted. That is, it is conditioned like I only accept the evidence brought in this way. Evidence is evidence. When we encounter a problem such as illuminating a dark place, it does not matter how it is illuminated. That is, it cannot be said that it is illuminated only with a candle or only with a lamp. It is sufficient to illuminate it by any other means. Fourthly, every person's perspective is different. If our external senses do not come to us, you will think that we cannot reach the truth for this reason. In order to bring civilization and technology like this, we may have to accept hesitation even in our simple decisions in our daily lives. To explain it this way, what is the thought that makes you not jump off a tall building every day? The fact that you will die. Someone comes to you and asks, "Why don't you jump?" Where do you get the idea that you will die? How many times have you asked before? You saw someone dying because they jumped off a building. Even if you saw it, how would you know if it was just a game? If everything was a lie, would it push you to jump if he said, "Come on, jump"? However, what he said might be true. What makes you decide not to jump is not the possibilities that that man said, but a combination of those possibilities. This is the feature of the human mind. It does not take into account the possibilities that have no evidence. It does not give credit. If it were not so, we would not even be able to sustain our lives, let alone people's dreams of going to other planets in space. I would even create a doubt, maybe even a possibility, about the facts that are in plain sight, and we would not be able to do anything. In short, I would not reach out to a fire in front of your eyes. Underneath your belief lies your 100% belief that the fire will burn your hand. Someone comes to you and says, maybe this fire is not burning, maybe you are hallucinating, etc. Since there is no evidence, it does not reduce your belief that the fire will burn your hand. Fifthly, we need to know that knowing the existence of something is different from knowing the nature of that thing. For example, let's take the example we gave at the beginning. If we find some meaningful inscriptions in a cave on Mars, the first thing that will come to everyone's mind without hesitation is aliens. What people mean by aliens is those who know that they can create some meaning by writing these inscriptions, those who have the will to prefer not to write the inscriptions, those who have the strength and power to write. And of course, it means a being that has life. Let's assume that we have found more and more irrefutable evidence for the existence of aliens and are sure of their existence. This does not mean that we can know what they look like or in every aspect, because knowing that they exist is one thing, knowing them is another. Similarly, if evidence for the existence of God is found, this evidence will mostly be about His existence. That is, you will not be able to recognize God with everything. Things like His features being far beyond the human mind do not mean that we cannot know His existence. By the way, while all people are sure of the existence of aliens, someone comes out, but you are referring to the features in humans. You think anthropomorphically that humans have intelligence. Maybe you think that the thing that would cause these inscriptions must be intelligent. Think about how much humanity would take it if they said that these inscriptions were not of aliens. Aliens could even be metaphysical creatures. I could not say that aliens are material creatures without having any evidence for this. Now, considering all we have said, let's think like this. Let's assume that the world is exactly the same as the world we are in now, but with this difference. Claims such as, there is no God, or there is no God, have not been discussed so far. Let's assume that no claims about God have been put forward. That is, let's make a claim that God exists. Let's examine the universe to prove it. Or in the same way, there is no God. We have a claim like, let's prove it doesn't exist. A clean world where no mind is infected with any ideology. And now we see that in such a world, atoms, the smallest building blocks of matter, choose ways that will result in a wonderful order that requires knowledge, which we see with our eyes, in countless possibilities that can cause chaos in the universe. How can we explain the fact that atoms, for which we have not the slightest evidence that they have a mind or consciousness power, are currently doing thousands of jobs at the same time, even though they are confused if a person with a mind and consciousness is given several different tasks? I'm not talking about the inscription. I mean, we entered a room and saw a picture. Then we don't say that there was a painter. Imagine that billions of simple Lego pieces lying scattered before our eyes suddenly started to move and came together to form a living organism. What would you think? Likewise, trillions of people who do not have the slightest merit for the actions they seem to do. How are we going to explain how atoms come together to build a human body? Look, I want to draw your attention again. We are not talking about a stagnant building that was designed and abandoned. You are witnessing thousands of blind, deaf, unconscious dead people suddenly get up and move in front of your eyes and build a building that requires knowledge of architecture and engineering, step by step. Imagine. By the way, delusions such as matter is eternal or atoms have always existed cannot answer our question. Imagine that those blind, dead men are eternal. This cannot be the answer to how they suddenly rose up in front of our eyes and built a magnificent building. Also, but you take yourself as a reference, and since you have intelligence, atoms also have a mind. You say that one should have a scientific mind while doing the work. Maybe atoms do not need a mind to do these works. Alternative options without evidence. How unreasonable is it to claim that a system that we humans have struggled with and researched for years, and only discovered branches of science such as anatomy, biophysics, biochemistry, embryology, physiology, histology, and microbiology can be done without science? We expect you to understand that it is nothing but a fallacy. Intelligent people go through years of training in order to become experts in any of these branches of science. A person can only specialize in a few sciences at most. How can we explain how a single atom can be an expert in all branches of science and perform all actions flawlessly without any confusion? And we are only talking about humans. These atoms form every living or inanimate structure that you can see in your eyes. That is, these atoms play a role in the implementation of not only the branches of science related to humans, but also all the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology that we have discovered. Let's take another of the thousands of jobs that atoms do, for example, the transfer of sounds. If a person with the intelligence to speak and the mouth to utter words were to imitate the voices of a few people, would appear on television, people would applaud and congratulate them. Well, if there were 100 people in one place, each speaking a different language with a different tone, of beings who do not have any of the adjectives we have just mentioned, every atom in the air without exception, how would it be more logical to explain the fact that 100 people speaking will convey the same voice tone, tongue, and accent without being surprised and without hindering one voice to another? We have mentioned that it is astonishing for a living person to imitate another person's voice beautifully. Now imagine that you are in a room with several blind, deaf, lifeless dead people next to them. You witness him imitating the voices of other people speaking exactly. Even if a Japanese person enters the room and speaks Japanese, even if a Frenchman enters the room and speaks French, people who are deaf, dumb, and dead can imitate the voices of other people exactly and convey them to each other with exact pronunciation. Could you hide your surprise in the face of such an event? Likewise, while we humans have the necessary qualifications to imitate someone else, it is difficult to imitate someone else's voice, not the voice of someone whose language we do not know. To imitate exactly the voice of someone we do not know, we cannot even pronounce the words correctly. While we cannot even pronounce the words correctly, beings who do not have scientific consciousness, an ear to hear, a mouth to speak, even beings that do not even have life, can correctly imitate the voices of all people. Doesn't it amaze you that we, as humans, go through months of training to learn a language we don't know and to become able to speak it with the correct pronunciation? Well, in order to convey the voices of all people with different languages, different voices, different speaking styles, we need a person who knows the voice, the way each person speaks, the dialect, the language. Isn't science required? Moreover, we have only talked about the human voice, regardless of the source. All the sound you hear is the transfer of satellite signals and radio frequencies. These beings called atoms are involved in the work. This event may seem like an ordinary thing to you, but it does not have the necessary attributes of the work it seems to do. It can't be normal for beings to do all this work. For example, if a person suddenly took off in front of you and flew before your eyes, of course you would be surprised because he started flying even though he had no features that would allow him to fly. But if you had seen people flying like this since you were born, this would seem like a normal thing and an ordinary event to you. But this still does not change the fact that it is an extraordinary event for people to fly in this way. Likewise, the fact that glassy beings such as atoms do things that require such high features and that it seems ordinary to us because we do not see it every day and do not witness the opposite does not change the fact that these events are extraordinary. This is what we are. After witnessing the events and thinking that there is something here that I cannot understand, how can these tiny particles do this job? After realizing that the alternative options we just mentioned cannot be an answer, I came to the conclusion that there is an entity that can do these things, even though we cannot see or perceive all these things that we see with our own eyes, moment by moment. Wouldn't it be more logical for us to conclude that beings without scientific consciousness and life comply with the laws that will result in the existence of complex structures like humans, moment by moment, and instead of saying that they did all these things, we can say that a being with a life that has the knowledge and the will to do it actually made them do it, moment by moment? Wouldn't it be more reasonable to say that there is another being that has the necessary attributes that can do these things, rather than answering the question that comes to our mind right now. That is, how sound is transmitted with atoms that do not have any knowledge or necessary attributes. When you see that the 5 items we mentioned at the beginning and the words presented as answers to these questions are just nonsense without evidence, think again. You ask whether there is evidence for the existence of God. We say, show us a place. Let that place not be evidence. Here is a reasoned, logical belief, and which alternative options based on fallacies. It is entirely up to you what you choose. Believe it or not. Well, those who have no knowledge said, what if God speaks to us, or if a miracle comes to us? Those before them said the same thing as they said. Their hearts are all similar to each other. They are a people who really want to know the truth. They swear by Allah with all their might that if a miracle is shown to them, they will believe in it. Say, miracles are only with Allah. Don't you understand?